Hi, this is Chris Monk, owner of Highline Guitars. If you've ever made your own electric guitar, you know that one of the difficult parts of the process is applying a finish. Unfortunately, it can require some complicated techniques, specialized equipment, and the materials are often not readily available and you have to order them and all that. So, wouldn't it be great if there was a way that you could apply a simple, easy, inexpensive finish that looks great and does a fantastic job of enhancing the appearance of your guitar as well as protecting the wood? Well, there is. Minwax Wipe-On Poly. Now, I know some of the elitist, purist, luthier guitar builders out there will poo-poo anything that has the Minwax logo on it. But I found that the product works really, really well. So I recommend it. You can actually, if you want to, make your own variation of it, which is essentially 1/3 polyurethane, 1/3 boiled linseed oil, and 1/3 mineral spirits. And it's essentially the same thing. This stuff works a lot like true oil. Not exactly the same, but similar. And the way that I'm going to be applying this is it's kind of a multi-stage process. I'll start out by sanding the body, and then I'll apply some stain and then some sealer and then finally the wipe-on poly. Now at this stage, I've sanded the body to about 220 grit. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to apply a stain. And the stain that I'm going to apply is just a natural tint. It's not really anything dark, although you can do whatever you want. And in truth, you could do water-based dyes, you could do oil-based stains, whatever. I mean, it's pretty flexible. So, but I'm going to be using just a simple oil-based stain. So I'm going to get started. All right, so I'm just doing some light sanding with 220 grit. And once that's finished, I will apply the wood stain that I'm going to go with, which is, like I said, a natural oil-based wood stain. There's a lot of different stains on the market, so really it's whatever you feel works the best. I like to use oil-based products, and there are quite a few water-based products out there, but one of the issues I have with the water-based is that it raises the grain, and the challenge is when you apply the stain, the water-based stain, you'll get the tint that you want, but when it dries, the grain has been raised and you have to sand that off, and when you sand that off, you can take some of the stain with it. So I just stick with an oil-based. The only disadvantage is with oil-based is that it does take a little bit longer to dry. No big deal. I'll just let it sit overnight and then I can go on with the next step. I'll be mixing up my own stain, and to do that, I'm going to be using boiled linseed oil, mineral spirits, artist oil paints, and in this case I'm going to be using, this is, I think this is raw umber. Yeah, raw umber. And this is just it's a raw sienna, so it's kind of a generic brown color. And then I'm going to add a couple of drops of Japan dryer. I'll mix it all up in a plastic container like this, and then I'll just apply it using a folded paper towel. Now the ratios are, it's roughly, well, let's say a 1/4 cup of boiled linseed oil, a 1/4 cup of mineral spirits. The amount of color you use is totally subjective. It just depends on what you think looks the best. And so what I recommend is when you add this color is you mix it all in and then test it out on some wood to see how it looks. And then just a couple of drops of the Japan dryer, that's all it needs. So I'm going to go ahead and get that mixed up and then start applying it. Well, the stain is now thoroughly dry. Originally, I was just going to let it sit overnight, and give it maybe 8 to 12 hours to dry. But such is the nature of stain. Stains can dry at different rates depending on the formulations. And since I made the stain myself, it was totally up in the air as to exactly how long it would take to dry. Typically though, with just the boiled linseed oil, mineral spirits, Japan dryer, and artist oils, it usually is dry to a touch in about 12 hours. But the one factor that can determine that is the artist oils themselves. Artist oils can dry at different rates, and that's something that can depend on brand. It can also depend on the color of the pigment. Some pigments just take a tremendously long time to dry, but it took a little bit longer, so I gave it a total of about 24 hours, and now it's pretty thoroughly dry. So now I'm ready to move on to the next step, and that's going to be to apply a sanding sealer to seal in the wood before we start to apply the wipe-on poly. Now, whenever I bring up sanding sealers, people ask, what is that and do I actually need to do it? Well, wood, as you know, is very absorbent. You could see that when you applied the stain, it soaked into the wood. If you don't seal the wood, seal the pores and the grain, when you start to apply any kind of a clear coat, it doesn't matter whether it's the wipe-on poly or nitrocellulose or polyester, whatever it is, acrylic. If the wood isn't sealed, the first 3 to 5 coats are going to soak into the wood, and in some cases it can soak in so much that you can't even tell you did anything. So what we do to prevent that is to use a sanding sealer, and the sanding sealer will seal up the pores and then will allow whatever clear coat we're going to use to dry right on the surface and not soak in. As a result, you don't have to waste so much clear coat and you are done much faster. So the sanding sealer I'm going to use this is from Cabot, and it's called a quick dry sanding sealer. There's actually several different kinds that you can use. You can use a water-based sanding sealers, or in this case, a solvent-based sanding sealer. The water-based sanding sealers are usually like an acrylic mixed into water, and then it has a thickening agent added to it, and that's what allows the sealer to pack into the wood grain, into the pores, and to plug them up so that they won't soak up any top coats. With the solvent-based sanding sealers, it is a solvent-based lacquer that serves as a binder. In this case, it's probably nitrocellulose. But then what they do is they mix into it a stearate powder, which is kind of like talcum powder. It's very, very fine. But that thickens it up. And when you apply it, and you can't spray it, you have to either wipe it on super fast, or better yet, brush it on with a disposable brush. And then you'll let it dry. And it usually dries to a touch in about an hour. You never want to use more than 2 coats of sanding sealer. Sanding sealer, when it's dry, is fairly soft. And if you apply numerous coats and then put your clear coat over the top, because of that base of sanding sealer that it's sitting on is so soft, eventually your top coats are going to crack and chip. So you just want to do 2 coats, and then they're going to be lightly sanded back until they're really smooth, and that's going to give us an excellent surface in which to apply the wipe-on poly. So I'm going to get started with that. Now I'm just going to apply this using a disposable brush. So now you have to work pretty quickly because this is a lacquer type product and it will dry very, very fast. So if you spend too much time, it'll gum up on you and it's very difficult to move the brush. Well, that's all the time I've got for this episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. In the next episode, I'm going to continue with part 2 of how I apply a wipe-on polyurethane finish. So keep an eye out for episode number 23.